on my deathbed did I realize that the son I had raised with my own hands, who was both sick and obsessive, was actually the illegitimate child of the other woman. 1. Ezra Shao and I have weathered 50 years of storms together. We have a pair of twins, a son and a daughter. Our son has been frail and sickly since childhood, and I took meticulous care of him, painstakingly raising him to adulthood, which led me to neglect our daughter. I lay on the hospital bed, with the doctor urging beside me, "The patient's condition is critical. The family needs to make a decision quickly. Surgery must be performed immediately. If surgery is performed, the patient has a very high chance of recovery." At this moment, my lips are chapped, and my throat is so hoarse I can no longer speak. I look at my husband in the hospital room with longing, because I am also a doctor, and I know that after the surgery, I could live for at least another 10 years. While my husband was hesitating, my cousin and my son Xiao Hang walked in together. With a sorrowful expression, my son said, "Doctor, we are giving up treatment. We don't want my mother to suffer anymore." The doctor sighed helplessly and walked away. "This son has been weak and sickly since childhood. I took him to major hospitals all over the country. When I was critically ill, he actually gave up treatment for the sake of a few tens of thousands in surgery fees. My heart has never ached so much before." My cousin Shunmai came to my side. She leaned close to my ear and whispered to me, "Lena Shun, to thank you, before you die, I'll tell you a secret. Actually, Xiao Hang is my son. Back then, you only gave birth to a daughter, Brother Ezra. To fulfill your wish of having both a son and a daughter, lied to you, saying you had twins. I never expected you to be so good to this weak and sickly child, willing to give everything to treat his illness. To thank you, I'm telling you this, so you can die with clarity. However, to be precise, my son is actually 3 days older than your daughter." I widened my eyes in disbelief. For the sake of my frail son, I neglected my healthy daughter, who had always been taken care of by my mother-in-law. Once, when my son had an episode and I took him to another city for medical treatment, my daughter accidentally fell into the river. The hard stones in the water cut her cheek, and my mother-in-law didn't take her to see a doctor. By the time I returned, her face had already become infected and suppurated. Even after treatment, severe scars remained. My once cheerful daughter became timid and cowardly from then on, no longer willing to go outside. With my last bit of strength, I bit my lip, letting the pain etch the hatred of this lifetime into my memory. If there is a next life, I will never marry this man again. 2. When I opened my eyes again, I had been reborn. Returning to 3 days before the wedding, there were many people at home, all fellow villagers helping to deliver my dowry. According to our local custom, the dowry is delivered 3 days before the wedding banquet, but the groom must come in person to fetch the bride, which is commonly known as receiving blessings. However, today, just like in my previous life, Ezra Shao did not come. Shunmai said her son is 3 days older than my daughter. In my previous life, the day after Ezra Shao and I got married, he returned to the military. A month later, I found out I was pregnant. That means, on this day in my previous life, he was with Shunmai. Just thinking about it makes me extremely disgusted. In my previous life, after I became pregnant, Shunmai disappeared. The next time I saw her was at the child's full-month celebration. Ezra Shao's family circumstances were not good. His parents were genuine farmers, and he had 2 younger brothers and 1 younger sister. His abilities were actually quite limited, though he was relatively hardworking. But without my uncle's support, how could he have risen so rapidly in his previous life? Shunmai is the daughter of my eldest uncle, 1 year older than me. Since childhood, my aunt has favored boys over girls, so Shunmai's food, clothing, and daily necessities were not as good as mine. In fact, even my own provisions were subsidized by my uncles. Even the dowry now was prepared by my uncles. Shunmai always liked to compete with me. Whatever I had, she wanted it too, and I suppose it's the same with men. Since that's the case, I'll just let her have him. Watching the cart carrying the dowry about to set off, I quickly stopped them. "Wait a moment." My voice made the villagers who were about to leave halt in their tracks. Since Ezra Shao doesn't have time to receive the dowry, there's no need to send it. I'm not getting married. Everyone looked at each other. In our tradition, If the groom doesn't personally come to collect the dowry, it's seen as a sign of disrespect towards the bride. In my previous life, I thought there was no need to bother with such trivial matters and didn't pay attention to the villagers' gossip. At that moment, an aunt stepped forward to praise me. "My dear, have you come to your senses? I always said you wouldn't be so foolish. What kind of groom doesn't come to collect the dowry himself? Not collecting the dowry means he doesn't value you. It's an old tradition." However, my aunt objected. "It's already loaded onto the cart. Just send it over. Why so many rules?" In my previous life, my aunt had tried to persuade me in the same way. In my previous life, I never saw a penny of Ezra Shao's allowance, while my uncle's family, who were lazy and idle, lived a prosperous and thriving life. Looking back now, it's not hard to guess why their family lived so well in the previous life. Aunt is already speaking up for Ezra Shao now. She must have received some benefits long ago. My father looked troubled. The banquet is already prepared, and the marriage is settled. Lena, marriage is not a game. Dad, I know marriage is not a game, so it's better to stop the loss before anything happens. But my mother slapped my father's arm. But what? He can't even come to receive the dowry. What could possibly be so important that he's too busy to receive the dowry? No marriage. No marriage. If my daughter says no marriage, then there's no marriage. My mother's favoritism brought tears to my eyes. In my previous life, because of that illegitimate child's illness, I had no time to take care of my parents. My mother even had to subsidize my medical expenses. And all the money I had was spent on treating that child, which left me with no energy to work and forced me to take an early unpaid leave when my mother was critically ill. I was still running around in a Beijing hospital for someone else's child. When my mother passed away, I was on the train back home and didn't even get to see her one last time. I hugged my mom, my voice choked with emotion. "Mom, I'm sorry, you silly child. Marriage is a lifelong matter. You haven't let anyone down. As long as you've thought it through, that's what matters." But my grandma was not pleased. "The engagement has been set for years, and we're about to send the dowry, calling off the wedding banquet now. What were you doing earlier? Look at you, you're not as sensible as Xiaomai. If you break off the engagement now, you'll be considered a twice-married woman. Who would want you in the future?" My grandmother is extremely biased towards my uncle's family. In fact, my uncle and my father are not biological brothers. My uncle is the posthumous child my grandmother brought with her when she remarried. In my previous life, my mother's early death was closely related to her. She made my mother do all the work, tormented her every day, and wouldn't allow the family to separate. Although my uncle's family got married early and moved out, she still constantly supported them financially. Of course, she had no income herself. The money she gave came from what my father and my second uncle handed over to her. My grandmother raised all three of my uncle's children. While she hardly even glanced at my brother and me, Grandpa tapped his tobacco pipe and said to Grandma, "Don't meddle in other people's business. Lena's affairs are for her parents to decide. We have no right to interfere." Grandma suddenly flared up. "As long as we haven't divided the family, I have the right to interfere. Go deliver the dowry now. Go, go. Hurry up and go, then let's divide the family." This was the first time in my 2 lifetimes that I saw my mother talk back to my grandmother. My grandmother was stunned for a moment, then picked up a willow branch to hit my mother. "You wretched woman, how dare you talk back?" I snatched the willow branch and threw it on the ground. My grandmother stepped forward to hit me, but I ignored her and hid behind my grandfather. I said to my grandfather, "Grandpa, I just don't understand why Grandma always favors Uncle. All my cousins were raised by Grandma, and the money my dad and second uncle earned was taken by her to support Uncle. Since they were young, my dad and second uncle have always had to give in to their older brother. In which family do younger brothers yield to the older one? Grandpa, is this what they call love me, love my dog?" My grandfather used to teach in the village. The phrase "love me, love my dog" might be hard for many rural people to understand, but my grandfather definitely understood it. Grandpa's expression changed instantly. "I know, this is a thorn in Grandpa's heart. In my previous life, I heard Grandpa and Grandma arguing. Grandma called Grandpa a good-for-nothing who couldn't provide her with a good life. Grandpa told Grandma to go find her dead ex-husband. No matter how capable he was long gone. Grandpa has always been dissatisfied with Grandma's favoritism. He has long wanted to divide the family assets and is also angry that his own son's hard-earned money is being used to support someone else's son, but when Grandma resorted to crying, making a scene, and even threatening suicide, Grandpa, being an educated man who valued his reputation, didn't want the whole village to know about their troubles, so he kept enduring it. Grandma is a typical rural woman. She simply couldn't understand what I was saying. Lena Shan, you little brat. So what if I favor your eldest uncle? He's handsome, smart, and filial, unlike your dad and your second uncle, who are just like your grandpa. All they know how to do is work like fools all day long. This grandmother really has no sense. She even added fuel to the fire between me and Grandpa. She's clearly saying that my grandfather is not as good as her ex-husband. Enough. Since you think the eldest is so great, let's divide the family property. After the division, you can go live with the eldest. Grandma was dumbfounded, never expecting Grandpa to say such a thing. Isn't this for Lena's own good? If she breaks off the engagement, it'll count as a second marriage. Who would want her then? If this counts as a second marriage, then what does that make you? Does that mean the eldest was born out of wedlock? Grandpa didn't spare Grandma any face. Because Grandma indeed hadn't married Uncle's father, Grandpa directly tore down her facade, for so many years. This was the first time Grandma had been publicly reminded by Grandpa in front of so many people that she was a second marriage. Unable to save face, she started wiping her tears. 3. Just as I was about to add fuel to the fire, Ezra Shao's parents rushed into the courtyard. I don't know who tipped them off. Aunt Shao hurriedly stepped forward and grabbed my hand. Lena, Auntie knows it's Ezra Shao's fault. Auntie has already asked his uncles to look for him. Don't worry. Ezra is just too willful. That brat. I absolutely won't let him off the hook. For something as important as marriage, you mustn't act on impulse. I smiled at Shao's mother, my mind filled with scenes from my past life of her scolding and hitting my daughter, Aunt Shao, since Ezra Shao doesn't want to get married. Don't force him. I suddenly remembered something I had almost forgotten. Shun Mai cannot marry Ezra Shao unless Ezra Shao leaves the military. Because Shun Mai's grandfather was originally a spy, back then her grandmother took her mother and lived in the countryside, so they weren't too heavily implicated. Later, they publicly severed ties in the newspaper, which saved their lives, but Shun Mai's political background check definitely wouldn't pass. No wonder they were sneaking around their whole lives in my previous life. I was just their shield. At that moment, I saw a familiar face in the crowd, Qian Fu, in my previous life. After I got engaged, he married Liu Saixia, the daughter of the village chief from the neighboring village. He was forced into this marriage by Liu Saixia, who used her father's position as village chief to pressure him. Because Qian Fu's family had been landlords in the past, they were heavily ostracized in the village. If he didn't marry Liu Saixia, his younger siblings wouldn't be able to attend school. He didn't want his brother and sister to remain trapped in the mud forever. He wanted them to break free. Although there was no college entrance exam at the time, he firmly believed that education would change their destiny. After marrying Liu Saixia, she became extremely demanding and suspicious. She suspected every day that he had someone on the side because Qian Fu was indeed very good-looking. In the village, Qian Fu had to avoid women in their 40s and 50s. Or else Liu Saixia would chase after them and curse. I was also cursed at because my daughter fell into the river and Qian Fu saved her. When I returned, I brought gifts to thank him, but I ended up being cursed out. Later, when my father broke his leg on the mountain, it was also Qian Fu who carried him down. Of course, I was cursed at again. This time, she came to my house to curse me. I heard from my mother that before I was engaged to Ezra Shao, Qian Fu's father had secretly proposed to my mother back then. My mother refused because she thought their family background was not good. Later, I heard from a friend of Qian Fu that Qian Fu has always liked me. Qian Fu, when Qian Fu heard me call him, he was stunned at first, thinking he had misheard. Qian Fu, will you marry me? As soon as these words were spoken, it was like a thunderclap that turned the courtyard upside down. After the commotion, there was a dead silence. My mother came up and pinched me hard. You little brat, what are you doing? My father also pulled me aside. Lena, don't talk nonsense. I pushed past my parents and went over to a bewildered Qian Fu. I'm asking you one last time. Will you marry me? Qian Fu seemed to snap out of his daze, his eyes reddening and his lips trembling. I do, he said, his voice shaking with emotion. I smiled at my mom and said, I'm going to marry Qian Fu, you can go prepare the dowry. My grandfather was patting his chest to calm himself. I knew he loved me dearly, so I ran over to him and whispered, Grandpa, Qian Fu has liked me for many years, but I never agreed before, even though his family background isn't great, he's hardworking and he's not the type to fool around. Grandpa, breaking off the engagement will definitely affect my reputation, so I'll be honest with you. The reason I'm calling off the engagement is because Ezra Shao and my cousin Shen Mai are having an affair. I kept it quiet today to save our family's face. Grandpa looked at me in disbelief. He has always doted on me and trusted me. Shen Mai is the child of my uncle's family, so Grandpa naturally doesn't think highly of her. After thinking for a moment, Grandpa nodded and said, All right, I agree, my dear granddaughter. Grandpa has let down your father and your uncle. We'll divide the family property tomorrow. I hugged my grandpa and said, Grandpa, I will take care of you when you're old. Grandpa affectionately patted my head. My grandpa tapped his tobacco pipe and said, Fu family boy, you must treat Lena well in the future. Qian Fu nodded repeatedly. When the dowry was being sent, Grandpa gave the order, and the courtyard became lively again. My grandmother was so angry that she slammed the door and went into the house. My aunt's face turned frighteningly pale, and she staggered as she ran home. Xiao's parents were so anxious they were running around in circles. They came over to grab my mother's hand again, but she shook them off. They wanted to stop the dowry procession, but were held back by the aunties watching the excitement, for, amidst the sounds of music and celebration along the way, Qian Fu felt as if he were floating. Everything seemed too unreal. When the dowry arrived at Qian Fu's home, his parents were still at home sorting beans. Father, Mother, I'm getting married the day after tomorrow. Today the dowry is being delivered. Clatter, the beans scattered all over the floor. The nanny was the first to react, tears streaming down her face as she immediately went into the house to make space for the dowry. I actually had quite a substantial dowry. I have 3 uncles. 2 are military officers, and 1 is the director of a supply and marketing cooperative. My mother is the only daughter in the family, and my uncles dote on their younger sister, but they are also frustrated by her weakness and inability to stand up for herself. Because Ezra Shao's family was not well off, my uncles pooled together to provide the 3 rounds, 1 sound, and 72 legs for my dowry. At the time, Ezra Shao's parents never missed an opportunity to show off in the village. After the dowry was arranged, I asked Qian Fu to ride the bicycle from the dowry and take me to the commune to make a phone call. The dirt road was bumpy, and I wrapped my arms around his waist from the back of the bicycle. The coarse fabric rubbed against my palms, yet I could clearly feel the taut lines of muscle at his waist. As he pedaled, his back rose and fell, carrying the scent of soap soaked with sweat. Suddenly, we hit a pothole, and I uncontrollably lurched forward, my forehead pressing against his heated back. He tilted his head and chuckled, the vibration of his Adam's apple rolling down his spine to my fingertips. Hold on tight. I buried my face against his back, clearly feeling him stiffen for a moment, listening to the clatter of the chain and his gradually quickening breath. I suddenly felt that this bumpy dirt road was just right. When we reached the commune, I saw the blush spreading to the tips of his ears. I called my uncle in the military district. Second uncle, I've changed grooms. Please don't submit the marriage report for Ezra Shao. I explained the whole story to my uncle, and he was so angry he slammed the table. The marriage report had always been with the military. Originally, we planned to go through the formalities at the military base after the wedding banquet. In my previous life, there was an urgent matter at the base, so we didn't get our marriage certificate until 3 months later. In rural areas, people aren't particularly fixated on marriage certificates. Everyone generally considers a couple truly married once the wedding banquet is held. Qian Fu was grinning from ear to ear the whole time, like a complete fool. I remember on the day of the wedding banquet with Ezra Shao in my previous life, he didn't smile from start to finish, and my mother was so upset that she secretly wiped away tears. Qian Fu dropped me off at my doorstep. And suddenly the smile on his face disappeared. Lainashan, are you serious? Or are you just using me to make Ezra Shao jealous? If you're just trying to make Ezra Shao jealous, I'll return your dowry in a few days. I'm willing to help you. I stepped forward, took his hand, and noticed his palm was sweaty. I'm serious. From now on, just call me Lena. Then I quickly kissed him on the cheek and ran back home. Qian Fu's ears turned red again. He touched half of his face and pushed the bike as he walked back. I entered the house with a smile. But when I saw Ezra Shao waiting for me at home, my face immediately fell. He stepped forward and pulled me close, saying, Lainashan, how could you make such a fuss over something as serious as marriage? I wanted to break free from his grip, but he held on even tighter. My dad saw this and immediately stepped in to stop him, giving Ezra Shao a shove that made him stumble. Ezra Shao, the engagement is off. Stop getting handsy and sit down so we can talk this out properly. Ezra Shao let go of my hand and angrily confronted me. What's all this fuss about? You won't marry a military man. Do you actually want to marry some country bumpkin instead? That's right, I'd rather marry a country bumpkin. My father couldn't help but frown. Ezra Shao, after all these years, I never expected you to be this kind of person. You didn't come to collect the dowry, and you still have the nerve to question my daughter. Ezra Shao thinks that because he's in the military and currently a company commander, he's something special, and he looks down on others. He's still putting on airs at a time like this. I find him utterly ridiculous. Uncle Shan, I had an urgent matter today, which is why I was delayed, Ezra Shao explained. What urgent matter could you possibly have at my uncle's house? Contributing to the continuation of the human race, I didn't hold back in calling him out. Ezra Shao's face instantly changed color. How can you talk nonsense? The evasiveness in his eyes had already given my father the answer. My father sneered, tomorrow I will find a matchmaker to return your family's betrothal gifts. From now on, we will have nothing to do with each other. When Ezra Shao heard that my family was serious, he finally started to panic. He had always thought I was bluffing. He believed that since I had been chasing after him for 4 years, I wouldn't be able to live without him. Lena, it's not what you think. Let me explain. Alright, go ahead. What were you doing at my uncle's house today? What could possibly be so busy there? He originally wanted to say that he wasn't at my uncle's house today, but seeing how certain I sounded, he didn't dare to argue. He still wanted to struggle, because he knew how much help my uncle in the military could provide him. In the end, he was pushed out of the yard by my brother. 5. In the early morning, I stood in the yard, still feeling dazed, not yet detached from the joy of rebirth. Outside the door came heavy knocking sounds, along with noisy talking. Opening the yard gate, I saw many people gathered at the entrance, with Qian Fu in the middle, followed by 4 people carrying 2 large boxes. TSK, this Qian Fu is really something. Coming to deliver the betrothal gifts to Lena, the aunties chattered away. My parents and brother also ran out of the house. And 2 large boxes were carried into the yard amid the crowd. Let's open them and see what's inside. Someone started, and the crowd got excited. Yes, open them up. Let's compare them with what the Shao family gave and see which family is more sincere. Actually, I knew that Qian Fu's family had been raided, so they definitely wouldn't have any valuable items. Even if they did, they wouldn't dare to bring them out openly. I refused to open the boxes. Who would inspect the dowry like that? I'm not foolish. After the crowd dispersed, the boxes were carried into the house. Qian Fu handed me the keys to the boxes, and I put them away. I could see the disappointment in his eyes. I quietly explained to him that we couldn't open the boxes today because my family was going to divide the household property, and opening them would make people envious. I saw a glimmer in his eyes. After seeing Qian Fu off, Grandpa indeed gave the order, telling my second uncle to summon the village chief. My second uncle was very excited and couldn't wait to run to the village chief's house. My grandmother also rushed out, and I knew right away that she must be going to find my eldest uncle. Everyone is here, including many villagers. Grandpa was the first to speak. Sons will eventually have to divide the family property sooner or later. Today, we've troubled the village chief to help divide the family assets. Eldest son, you moved out long ago after getting married. So today's division has nothing to do with you. Just enjoy the show." Upon hearing this, my grandmother protested, "Why should the eldest son have no part in dividing the family property? When dividing family assets, everyone should have a share. You, as a stepfather, are truly biased." The crowd sighed in disbelief. Who didn't know that the eldest uncle had already moved out long ago? An aunt couldn't stand it any longer and said, "Si Jinhua, how many times does your eldest son need to take from the Shun family's property? Just, how shameless can they be? It's not enough to have raised them, and it's not enough to have taken their share once. Now they want to take it again. They came with nothing, grew up eating the Shun family's food, and now they've turned into leeches." The crowd buzzed with discussion. My grandfather was truly disheartened. Who has ever heard of dividing family assets a second time after the first division? If you insist on dividing again, fine. Return the money and items from the first division and make up for the household funds that should have been contributed over these years. My grandmother, like a shrew, threw herself on the ground, slapping her thighs. The village chief scolded, "Si Jinhua, that's enough. These two are also your children. Don't be so biased." My grandmother muttered and fell silent. Then stood up, dusting off her clothes. "If we don't divide the family assets, that's fine too, but Lena has so much dowry. Xiao Mai definitely won't have this much when she gets married in the future. Let's set aside Lena's betrothal gifts for Xiao Mai." Her words were truly shocking. "Pa, my daughter's dowry was put together by my brothers. Did you contribute even a single cent? Go ask Shen Mai's uncle to put it together instead." This time, my mother was genuinely furious. My father lowered his head in silence, but I could see the anger in his clenched fists. "You shameless hussy," my grandmother cursed, reaching out to strike my mother. My grandfather knocked his tobacco pipe against my grandmother's outstretched hand. My grandmother burst into loud sobs. "Si Jinhua, I never expected you to be so shameless. I won't separate from the family. I want a divorce." My grandmother was dumbfounded. The crowd was all cursing her. Shen Mai's eyes welled up with tears. Looking pitiful and delicate, "Grandpa, I am also your granddaughter. Lena and I are sisters. If she gets so many dowries for her marriage, what will happen to me in the future?" "Woo-woo." My grandfather was so angry that his beard trembled. "What does your marriage have to do with me, Lena? Is your maternal grandmother's family all dead? Did I make your grandfather a traitor?" My father also lost his temper this time. My aunt was so ashamed that she shed tears. Shen Mai bit her lip. Her eyes filled with hatred. Grandfather clutched his chest and gave Shen Mai a deep look. "Village chief, I want to sever ties with the eldest son's family. From now on, my life and death have nothing to do with them. He only needs to support his own mother. I want to cut ties too." My father said, "Me too." My second uncle also stepped forward. My eldest uncle looked incredulous. He never expected that my father and second uncle, who had always obeyed him since childhood, would now dare to cut ties with him. I agreed with them, because in my previous life when my grandfather fell ill, my grandmother didn't care at all, and my eldest uncle didn't contribute a single penny. It was entirely my mother and my second aunt who took care of him. Grandma refused again. "I want to live with the third son. They are all my sons. Why should only the eldest support me in my old age?" My grandfather sneered. "The eldest has been married for over 20 years and hasn't contributed a single cent to the family. He comes by every now and then to ask for help. The second and third sons have been giving you money for over 20 years, even by rotation. It should be his turn now." My grandmother was left speechless. The eldest uncle's family naturally disagreed. The eldest aunt came from a questionable background, and without the support of my grandfather's large family, they would undoubtedly struggle in the village. "Dad, we're not here to divide the property. Please don't sever ties with your son. I haven't even had the chance to fulfill my filial duties yet." The uncle was crying as he spoke, looking every bit like a son abandoned by his own father. "That's right, Dad, we haven't had the chance to be filial yet." The aunt also knelt down. My grandfather was a stubborn old man, and no one could change his mind. "I have my own sons and grandsons. I don't need anyone else to fulfill filial duties. I've already done more than enough by raising you to adulthood." The village chief also shared the surname Shen and was from the same clan as grandfather, so naturally, he sided with him. He immediately made a decision. "Shen Jianbin, You were brought into the Shen family as a posthumous child. The Shen family raised you. And you got married and had children. Giving 100 yuan is your way of repaying the upbringing. From now on, life, old age, sickness, and death have nothing to do with you. Uncle Shen Jianbin almost collapsed on the spot. Even if he disagreed, it was useless. The village chief was like the local emperor of the village. In the end, after mediation by the village chief, the family's belongings were divided into 4 shares, one for the grandparents, one for the second uncle, one for my father, and one for the rest. This was considered an unusual way of dividing the family assets. The family property was divided equally, but there were only 3 rooms in the house. In the end, the second uncle and my father each got 1 room. Grandfather gave grandmother 100 yuan, and grandmother went to live with the eldest uncle's family, which counted as her share of the house. This 100 yuan was also used to offset the money that the uncle should have given to the grandfather. In our area, after the family divides, it is common to provide a monthly living allowance of 5 yuan, with half going to the grandfather and half to the grandmother, each receiving 5 yuan per month. Grandma was dumbfounded. Previously, my father and second uncle would each contribute 50 or 60 yuan every month because both of them were carpenters. Grandma was already in a difficult position and had no choice but to be packed up and sent to the uncle's house that very day. In the evening, I opened the dowry sent by Qian Fu, and I was truly shocked. I never expected him to be so bold as to send so many things. It's a good thing I didn't open the box at the time, or I would definitely have been investigated. A pair of gold bracelets, 2 sets of large cotton quilts, 2 bolts of cloth, a watch, a radio, and a pair of jade geese. These jade geese were clearly not ordinary items. Underneath the box was also a deposit slip for 2,000 yuan. This is the difference between being valued and being ignored. What I didn't expect was that Qian Fu had so much money. The dowry sent by the Shao family was also returned by the matchmaker. 2 very thin cotton quilts, a set of pillow towels, 2 towels, 2 enamel basins, and a betrothal gift of 50 yuan. I discussed with Qian Fu, there is a radio in my dowry. Can we leave it for Grandpa to listen to? Qian Fu had no objections. In my previous life, I wanted to give the radio from my dowry to Grandpa, but Ezra Shao disagreed. However, the radio somehow went missing, and I searched for a long time but couldn't find it. When I handed the radio to Grandpa, he refused to take it, saying, "How can I accept your betrothal gift? Take it back, I have 2. What's the use of having so many? Electrical appliances will break if left unused for too long." Grandpa happily accepted it. Grandpa could be quite the tease too. From then on, he would sit by the main entrance every day listening to his radio, surrounded by several elderly men and women. 6. On the wedding day, I woke up early and put on beautiful bridal makeup. The bright red dress was particularly eye-catching. Looking at my reflection in the mirror, untouched by hardship, I felt indescribable emotions. Actually, I still hold a grudge about being deceived in my past life and raising someone else's child. But I firmly believe that heaven has brought me back because good and evil will eventually be repaid. I can't waste my time on seeking revenge. Everything is in the hands of fate. I must be filial to my parents and live well. I got on the bicycle, and Qian Fu rode around the village, followed by a group of running children. When we arrived at the Fu family's doorstep, I saw Ezra Shao, wearing a wrinkled military uniform, disheveled and unkempt. He wanted to step forward, but Shunmai pulled him back from behind. I changed my clothes and went with him to the courtyard to toast the guests. I didn't see the Shao family, but Shunmai was still there. I quietly said to Shunmai, "I wish you and Ezra Shao a happy union for 100 years, but you will never be able to step into the limelight. No matter who Ezra Shao marries, your name will never appear on that marriage certificate." Shunmai clenched her hands tightly. I curved my lips into a smile as Qian Fu carried me into the bridal chamber. The man's tall, imposing figure pushed open the wooden door adorned with double happiness characters, scattering the red dates and peanuts in the enamel bowl all over the floor. His military green Dakran shirt was soaked with sweat, but he held me steadily. "Mind your head," he said, his chin brushing against the top of my hair as he bent down, his stubble tickling me. Waves of laughter rose from the main hall, and my second aunt's voice rang out, Time to tease the newlyweds. I tightened my grip on the fabric of his shoulder. Kiss her, kiss her. Someone started chanting, and soon others joined in. He leaned down, his lips soft against mine, and I felt my cheeks grow warm. After a while, the crowd dispersed. He tucked a stray strand of my hair behind my ear and whispered, "Lena, am I dreaming?" I answered his doubt with action. That night, Qian Fu was gentle, considerate, and careful. And everything fell into place naturally. Having lived 2 lives, I now deeply realize how much I had missed out on in my previous life. It wasn't until I returned home 3 days later that I learned Ezra Shao had been recalled by the military the day after my wedding, just like in my previous life. Qian Fu and I went together to get our marriage certificate and took our wedding photos. Qian Fu goes to the city every day. I don't know what he does, but each time he comes back, he brings me a lot of money. I work at the hospital, and I know that the college entrance exams will resume in just over a year. Whenever we have free time, we start reviewing. 7. A month later, Ezra Shao returned. It turned out that Liu Tsaixia, the daughter of the village chief from the neighboring village, had taken a liking to Ezra Shao. Shao's mother started showing off in the village again. I called my uncle and asked him to help speed up the approval of Ezra Shao's marriage report. Ezra Shao's wedding was very rushed, with the engagement and banquet all arranged within a week. Perhaps only I know the reason why. Shenmai disappeared again. She must have been hidden away by Ezra Shao to rest during her pregnancy. 3 months later, I became pregnant, and Qian Fu took great care of me, personally cooking nutritious meals for me every day. In my previous life, when I was pregnant, I still had to serve Ezra Shao's entire family. Back then, Ezra Shao probably gave all his money to Shenmai. Even while pregnant, I never spent a single penny of his. Ezra Shao returned to the village frequently, coming back several times a month, because Liu Tsaixia called the military unit every day. But this time, Ezra Shao couldn't pass off fish eyes as pearls. Because Liu Tsaixia never got pregnant, I secretly wrote a letter to the village chief next door, telling him that his good son-in-law had a woman on the side. The village chief was half convinced and half doubtful. He began to investigate secretly and discovered Shenmai's existence. To my surprise, they didn't confront Ezra Shao but instead acted as if nothing had happened. Liu Tsaixia, on the other hand, stopped pestering Ezra Shao. I really can't figure this out. I am a brain surgeon, and during a gynecological checkup, I saw Liu Tsaixia going to the hospital's gynecology department for an examination. A colleague helped me look at her medical records, and it turned out she had undergone an abortion, which led to infertility. Sitting in the office, lightly tapping my fingers, I seemed to understand why they tolerated Shenmai having a child. When I was 8 months pregnant, a huge scandal shook the entire village. Liu Tsaixia found Shenmai, who lived near the military base. Shenmai's child had just turned 1 month old. Liu Tsaixia took the child and went to the military base to seek an explanation from the leadership. In the end, Ezra Shao was disciplined, discharged from the military ahead of schedule, and not assigned a job because the military knew he had engaged in improper relationships with women, and the other party was the descendant of a major spy. Ezra Shao returned to the village, and Shenmai also came back, holding the child in her arms. Shenmai took the child back to her parents' home. Since Grandma moved to Uncle's house, she has been living in Shenmai's room. Although Aunt favors sons over daughters, when it comes to choosing between her mother-in-law and her own daughter, she would definitely side with her own daughter. Besides, Grandma could no longer provide continuous financial support as she used to. What can 5 yuan a month even do? The aunt enclosed the pigsty with adobe bricks and moved Grandma in there. While her filial eldest son did nothing to care for her, the aunt would occasionally give her some leftover food when she remembered, but most of the time Grandma went hungry. Once, Grandma sneaked back home and saw Grandpa wearing the new clothes I had just bought for him, lying in a rocking chair and listening to the radio. She turned green with envy. She confronted my father and second uncle, asking why they, as her own sons, neglected their own mother. My second uncle was very calm. "Mom, you should understand how you treated us in the past. I had to go up the mountain to gather firewood when I was only 6 years old, and when I came back, I still had to wash clothes for my 11-year-old brother." My grandmother cried. She regretted it, but while my uncle could tolerate it, my aunt couldn't. In the end, my grandmother was driven out by my mom, and my second aunt, Ezra Shao, was kept under strict control by Liu Cixia, so he had no chance to get close to Shen Mai. Ezra Shao didn't have any money to give her now either. After staying at home for half a year, Shen Mai was driven out by her cousin's wife. She had nowhere else to go, so she knelt outside Ezra Shao's house, holding her child. Surprisingly, Liu Cixia accepted her and let her move into the Shao family. However, the child was sickly and weak. Even when the child fell ill, Liu Cixia wouldn't allow them to go to the hospital, saying, "It won't die, it's far from the heart. Who goes to the hospital every day? It'll get better when it's a bit older." Ezra Shao didn't dare argue. Liu Cixia had 4 older brothers who had beaten him up once, and he never dared to challenge her again. Ezra Shao resumed his days of earning work points. At that time, one still needed an introduction letter to go anywhere. In his previous life, Ezra Shao had used his military connections to repeatedly obtain introduction letters for Shen Mai, allowing her to follow him as an army dependent. In this life, Shen Mai couldn't go anywhere because the village chief simply ignored her. She had no choice but to live with the Shao family, struggling to survive under Liu Cixia's watchful eye. Liu Cixia beating her was a common occurrence. She would even hit the child when she was angry. Eventually, Shen Mai developed murderous intent and put rat poison in Liu Cixia's food. Liu Cixia died. Shen Mai was arrested. Ezra Shao had one of his legs broken by the Liu brothers, and Shen Hang ended up like a beggar, scavenging for food everywhere, sometimes even lying on the ground convulsing for a while.